Hey, welcome back to the channel. I see a bunch of knives on the table today, and we're going to be talking about all of them. That's right, we're going to be talking about all of them because each one of these knives represent the company that survived the crash of 29. Now, a lot of us know that crash as the Great Depression. Terrible time in American history. But it also marks the date, not in a single moment, not in a single day, but over a period of time, that the American cutlery industry crashed. The worst industrial disaster in the history of the United States. No other industry in the United States suffered such a severe, precipitous crash as the cutlery industry did in that period of time. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be talking about the companies that survived the crash of 29 and a little bit about what happened and why it happened. And if you'd like to hear more about that, go ahead and check out the video. Hey, welcome back to the fortified castle. Hi to all my minions out there. I love minions. Boop, 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 boop. Minions. Want to thank all of my faithful for checking in and checking out this video. It's going to be an interesting one. Guarantee you that. Guarantee you that. So, what are we talking about? Well, from 1890 to 1920 was the golden era of American knife making. It's a time where the knives pretty much got to where we are today. Very high quality knives that we've come to enjoy as Americans. And it's a time when they surpassed the knives that the Germans were producing, and also the knives that the English were producing, which for so many years produced the finest knives in the world. And at the end of that, there was a severe downturn in the American cutlery industry. That really began in earnest in 1929 with the stock market crash. But it had actually started, years before. When the tariffs came off, the Taft-McKinley tariff was enacted in 1890 to give not only the cutlery industry, but other industries time to build up and get strong without the influence of mainly the English, but other countries as well that were dominating the American market at the time. So by 1909, those tariffs had come off, and right away, the English had suffered their own downturn in cutlery. So they weren't as much the problem as the Germans. The Germans started producing these inexpensive cut-rate knives and sent them into America, which the Americans had a hard time competing against. So really, by the 1920s, by the mid-1920s, this downturn was in full swing. Where the Americans were trying to compete with these less expensive knives flooding into the country. But that wasn't the only problem. That period of time from 1900 to 1920 was a great demographic shift. And so a huge amount of people were moving from the rural areas of America, the farmlands, the small towns, and they were moving to the big cities to take advantage of the industrial jobs that were being provided with America's Industrial Revolution. And so, consequentially, when you moved to the city, you just didn't have the need for knives the way traditionally people needed knives. And so the market was contracting. And at the same time the market's contracting, number of people buying the product, you also had these huge imports flowing into the country. Then in 1929, you had the stock market crash. So although this only affected about 1 million people directly, and the population of the country was around 75 million at that time, it really affected everybody. It not only you had a stock market crash, a great loss of wealth overnight, but you also had a bunch of bank closures. Those closures of banks affected the ability of people to obtain easy money, to continue growing, to continue operations. So it affected a lot of businesses. One of the businesses that affected the most was the hardware business. So it severely affected the hardware business, and this is where most knives were sold. So you had a situation overnight where companies just couldn't sell their product. So it took several decades actually to recover from the Great Depression of 1929. The impact of that financial hit on the United States, coupled with demographic changes in rising imports, cheap imports, that were good quality. All of those things combined to cause the crash of the American cutlery companies, or just American cutlery in America. At the end of that, you have World War II. That infuses a lot of money into the cutlery industry. The military needed a lot of knives. There were 23 million servicemen that served during World War II. So a lot of knives in a very short period of time, and the United States government was paying for that. So by the end of 1945, that infusion of money really helped these companies that you see on the table today survive. Had it not been for World War II, it's really unclear that any of them would have survived. So let's look at these companies that survived the Great American Cutlery crash. So first up is Colonial. Colonial was a company that from the get-go did not make particularly expensive knives. There were always inexpensive knives that they produced. And they started in 1926. They went to 1997 before Colonial finally closed up shop. But they were known for inexpensive knives. By the way, as we talk about these companies, there's more knives on the table. I'll explain that. But there's 12 companies we're going to talk about. As we talk about them, all these companies produced knives for the military during World War II. Go figure, right? And they were the ones that coincidentally made it through the crash. So at the start of the downturn in American cutlery, there were thousands of companies in the United States. At least 300 American companies, probably a lot more. By the end of all this, in 1945, there's 25 American companies. These 12 companies are the largest of that group. Most of the other ones that you could add on to this table here were very small companies making, very small quantities of knives. Some lasted a few years, some lasted 20, and some didn't last 10. So that's why we're talking about these 12. So, yeah, it was 1997 before Colonial went out of business. They made all kinds of knives, though. They made these fold-in traditional folders. They made uh, inexpensive fixed blade knives. Next one is Case. So Case started business in 1905, and they continue to manufacture knives today in America. This is, of course, a saddle horn from Case. I think it's a model 100. Yeah, model 100. Really pretty knife. Cases became, for some reason, I don't know what, but it's a symbol of Americana. Um, and they are still producing knives. Next one is Camillus. Camillus Knife Company started in 1902 and went out of business in 2007. Today, Smith & Wesson owns the trademark for Camillus. Camillus knives are still being made, but they're made in China. They're not made in an American factory. And that's why I don't really extend the date of these knives. The company went bankrupt in 2007. So it exists, it continues to exist as a trademark only. Imperial Knife Company. So Imperial Knife Company was known for making inexpensive knives, non-traditional knives. Let me see. I didn't bring one anyhow. They made inexpensive shellback knives, but this is the older one made before 1936. It's a scout knife, but even though the knife is made in a traditional way that knives had been made, it's very sturdy. You could see it has a pressed-in scale. It's very thin. You can see it right there. It kind of moves. And so they were still inexpensive knives, even though the ones prior to 1936 were pretty sturdy, made in a traditional fashion. Imperial became partners with Albert Bear, who owned Ulster knives. This is an Ulster knife right here, an older one. It is a really nice knife, but Ulster knives just got cheaper and cheaper. And Albert Bear bought Schrade Cutlery. This is a Schrade knife right here, genuine bone peach seed jigging, and it's their model 94, which is kind of rare. Everybody sees the 93, which is a Trapper, and not the 94. Schrade Walden. It's a 294. So the 293 is a Trapper that everybody knows. These are kind of rare to find. This was just a jackknife, not a Trapper. Anyhow, Imperial joined forces with Albert Bear, who owned Schrade. That's why I threw these in here. Technically, they were one company, although Ulster's stock never changed. So it didn't work like a normal subsidiary type of situation with normal American mergers. These were actually a separate company, and Albert Bear exercised his own authority over Schrade Walden, but they collaborated extensively together. And eventually Albert Bear bought Imperial, and it became Imperial Schrade. Today, you can still buy Imperial knives, and you can still buy Schrade knives. They're made in China, and they're owned by Smith & Wesson, the trademark. Next up is K-Bar. K-Bar has a long history. They started out in 1899 as Union Knife and Razor Company, and also as Brown Brothers. And then in when was it? Let's see. I think 1910 is what I'm thinking. 1910, they adopted the Union Cutlery mark, and they were Union Cutlery up until 1947 when the company officially changed its name to K-Bar. And then this company has a storied future. It's taken over in 66 by Coal National, and then in 74 by Ontario. Production was stopped in 77, and finally in 1997, Alcas bought K-Bar and started producing knives in the original factory again, and that's why I include it, because even though they were sold, stopped production at one point for a period of time and started again, they are the same company making the same knives in the same factory. So that's why they're included in this. What's next? Utica. So this is a Utica knife here. It's a dog leg. It's one of the few dog legs that I have. Beautiful knife. It's a large dog leg and would be considered a jumbo dog leg, which makes it kind of rare. You can see the old circle Utica right there. Utica starts out in 1910. It was a group of investors in the town of Utica thought if they built this plant, it would grow and produce jobs for the city, which it did. So Utica changed its name to Cutmaster. Here is a Cutmaster right here. And they started doing that around 1937. Wasn't fully realized though. And then later in the 2000s, I'm thinking around 2011, the company finally changed its name back to Utica. It's known as Utica today. And Utica still produces knives in America. They produce modern folders, fixed blade knives in America today. Up until a couple of years ago, they still produced a couple models of slip joints. I can't find that they're doing that. I checked on that before the video. They're no longer selling made in America slip joints. Next one up is Powell. This is a Powell cattle knife right here. Really big knife, actually. There you see the Circle Powell Cutlery. They adopted Powell Blade Company, and it was a straight one a little bit later. But Powell started off in 1922. Hold on just a second. Okay, my cats are driving me crazy. So they started off in 1910, or I'm sorry, 1922, as Utica Knife and Razor Company. It's a really rare tang stamp to find on a knife. And then in 1935, they changed their name to Powell, and they ran to 1953. This is Karagas. Karagas, another company that has a long history, started in 1886. This is a company that the Case brothers worked with for a while, and then they continued to work closely with the Case family throughout their history, Karagas' history. You can see right there, Karagas Cutlery, Little Valley, New York. And this is a sleeve board, opposite end sleeve board. Really nice. Karagas made unusual designs. So the company was started by an Englishman, and they produce kind of English type designs, a little different than American companies. They were very robust knives. That's what they had. were known for, and most of their knives were larger. They made a lot of really big knives, and they went out of business in 1963. Just they didn't go broke or bankrupt. They just went out of business. The family just decided, okay, we don't want to play this game anymore. What else we got? Robeson Cutlery Company. Very long history on Robeson. This is an English jack produced by Robeson. Super nice. And man, the bone is just in great shape on this. And the knife is too. Look at the blade geometry is good. You can see the Robeson sure edge mark on here. Robeson, there's at least 13 marks. I think they actually had more marks, but most commonly seen are the 13 marks that most people know, and that's printed in books. So Robeson officially starts in 1893. That's what most books will tell you. But actually, Robeson Cutlery started in 1885. So very long history on Robeson. They ran in 1965. And 65 Federal took over Robeson, and then in 74 Ontario took over Robeson, and in 77 the trademark ceases, right? So they just stopped making these knives. Most collectors only consider a Robeson knife one made up to 1965 before they sold out to Federal. And just fantastic knives. Next is Queen. Queen's company has a very interesting company history. It's most known for this winter bottom bone, which is made to look kind of like stag with these long grooves. Case calls this second cut stag. And you can see here it's got a little green color in there, right there. So this is a rare coloration of Queen knives, and you don't see this very often. Queen started in when did Queen start? 1922, I believe, is when Queen started. Yeah, 1922, and ran up to 2018. So they had a long history. Today, when they went out of business, the company just all its equipment was sold off and trademarks. Smoky Mountain Knife Work owns some trademarks for Queen. Cooper Cutlery owns some trademarks for Queen. And there's another company, I think Smith & Wesson may own some of the Queen trademarks. Might be wrong about that though. Another great company, Western. This is an opposite end Western serpentine opposite end. Beautiful knife made by Western. Western Cutlery started in 1911 by H. Platts, who had to go out to Colorado for cleaner air. He had consumption disease. It was a lung disease caused by grinding. And they ran up until 2000. That's not right. They ran up until 1984. Yeah. Coleman bought them in 1984. In 1990, the company was bought by an investor group from Coleman. They couldn't turn a profit, so in 1922, they closed the doors on the factory. They sold all the equipment and trademarks to Camillus. So Camillus had the trademarks for Western. Any Western you see now is made in China. Boker's another one. So Boker established an office to sell their knives in America in 1856. They worked with the Union during the Civil War, gained a good reputation, but didn't start making knives in America until after the Taft-McKinley Act of 1890. So in 1899, Boker forms a partnership with um, come on, get it, Valley Forge. And by 1916, they have controlling interest of Valley Forge. And from that point on, they're an American company, Boker USA. Boker USA is another one that passed through a lot of hands. In 1965, New Britain Manufacturing bought them. And then in 1968, New Britain was absorbed by Litton Industries. In 1970, J. Weiss bought Boker from Litton Industries. And in 1976, Cooper Industries bought Boker from J. Weiss. And then in 1983, Cooper shut the doors on Boker. Now, Boker Soligen has a trademark again, and there is a Boker USA, but they're made overseas. They're not making any knives in America. But it was one of the great survivors of the crash. And I think that concludes our journey through the knives that made it. Yep. So that's 12 companies: Colonial, Camillus, Case, Imperial, K-Bar, Powell, Utica, Robeson, Queen, Western, Boker USA. All survived the great crash of 1929. No other industry has ever suffered such a severe crash, where at the end of it, there were just a handful of companies producing knives in America. The railroad crash, the shipping crash, the coal crash that happened in America. No other industrial slowdown was as dramatic, as quick as this was. So I hope you enjoyed the video. Hope you found it informative, and thanks so much for checking it out.